What's going on, everyone? I'm back with another video. This video is going to be looking at how PSG knocked RB Leipzig out of the Champions League and made it no longer possible for Leipzig to qualify for the knockout stages of the competition. But before we get into the tactics behind the match and how RB Leipzig played a lot better than the results showed, check out both my books. They're online, they're on Amazon, and there's links to both my books in the description below, so be sure to check that out, as well as Keyframe. It's how I made this video, and there's a link to that in the description as well. So PSG in the first third created a back three using their goalkeeper and two central defenders being split by their goalkeeper, and the width was created through their fullbacks for most of the game. This gave a lot of freedom for their midfielders to occupy the center corridors in different ways. They often look to occupy the central corridors with four players in their central midfield position, and this was a very fluid approach, which often saw two holding midfielders who are positioned in the same vertical line at this moment, but also consisted of Neymar, Di Maria, and other players further forward, dropping deeper to then create this four-man diamond. RB Leipzig also used asymmetry because of the asymmetric build-up that PSG would implement in the midfield third, and to start off they pressed with two central forwards, and they also went with a midfield three. Here they are playing off-centered, favoring the wide area with the fullbacks advancing on to then create this asymmetry to then a fullback being pressed by a wide midfielder or a wide central midfielder, versus on this weak side, a bit longer distance from the ball, the fullback would be pressed by a wingback and then covered by his central midfielders. Now in the midfield third, they stuck with their 5-3-2 shape with three central midfielders, and what this did is it created a natural staggering between the two forwards and three holding midfielders, so the space between the forwards and midfielders was often occupied by the Leipzig players either through direct man orientation or through the use of cover shadows to block entry passes into these two holding midfielders. This became more difficult with the use of a back three or asymmetric back four, creating a three-man central build-up for a PSG, looking to then create more passing options into the holding midfielders of PSG and looking to create a numerical advantage in their first line of build-up. Now what this did is it created a lot of passing options from the first to second line of their build-up, and it created opportunities in the wide area. So as we see in the wide area, it's relatively vacated because of the heavy emphasis of first PSG to play through the central corridors in their build-up, and then the heavy occupation of RB Leipzig in these areas during their defensive phase. Also, playing with a back five gave them a little bit more freedom to then press in areas like the half space, as we see on either side, to then be able to track runners like Mbappe or Neymar when they were to drop deeper, and not let these players have freedom or space to use their quality. Now, one thing that's really impressive about the RB Leipzig side is their flexibility and fluidity, especially in their defensive third, in their defensive organization. So what I mean by this is their ability to switch structures to better carry out the team's goals out of possession. So here they go with a three-man front line and still maintaining their back five, but now they go with two holding midfielders now instead of the three central midfielders. And what this did is created a 5-2-3 shape, allowing them to accurately press each of the players in the central corridor. But what it did as well, it created a numerical disadvantage in the midfield third. So when PSG have inefficient occupation of the central corridors as they do here in their midfield, this isn't as big of a deal and their press could actually be quite effective. But when they have direct passing options and passing connections into their midfield three, Leipzig could be exposed, but it's the situational change of structure carry out the team's principles and the team's goals out of possession that make them so good and make moments like these very underrated, as well as creating their numerical advantage at the back with then PSG's front four here playing asymmetrically with their front three playing very narrow and the fullback advancing higher up the field. So by playing with a back five, it still gives them this added coverage. So if PSG play direct, they have a free man to then cover the play in behind. So now we have the five-man build-up shape from PSG created via movement of their double pivot or an asymmetry in their back four. And now we see the high compactness of RB Leipzig, which has forced the use of dual width from the PSG players on this strong side. So we see Di Maria fading out into the wide area, creating dual width with the fullback, freeing up movement, but it also shows the high level of control Leipzig are able to create in the central corridor in their mid block to force players like Di Maria into a wider area, where then Leipzig are better suited to defend, isolate possession, and win the ball and transition through the half space in a very vertical and offensive-minded way. Now here's where the goal started from PSG to make a 1-1 early on in the match, where then they would go 2-1 up and then finish the match 2-2, which would only give Leipzig a point, which wasn't enough to secure a potential knockout round appearance for the German side. But as we said, the very fluid midfield three and front three of PSG often saw players like Neymar drop deeper because as higher up they don't have the space or the access to the ball. So oftentimes when players are very limited higher up the field between the lines in dangerous areas due to compactness, man orientation, or the use of cover shadows or some sort of concept like these, oftentimes players like Neymar will drop deeper in the half space to find the ball and find possession. So now what this does is it forces the central defender into an uncomfortable position as we see him stepping with Neymar but stopping about 5 yards short, which creates a huge gap in the back five with the wing back just off our screen here. But with this big gap, it creates opportunity for PSG to play through. And now we can even see the margins is so small to break down this Leipzig defense because they still have cover from holding midfielders. Their midfielders are all behind the ball in pretty good position. Now there is a controlled passing lane into Mbappe, but he's man marked by a central defender who's the ball side of Mbappe with cover of a free central defender. So in this moment, Leipzig are in control of their defensive situation, but the goal still comes out of this because qualitative advantage of having Neymar and Mbappe in your side, as well as Di Maria in combination, to then create something out of nothing or create good opportunities when the defense is well structured and in relative control of the attacking move. So when it's moments like these that Leipzig conceded from, ultimately decided their future on how they would go out of the Champions League. Now from one half to the next, nothing really changed. The wingbacks became more aggressive later on in the game. As we see here, the jumping wingback leaving his connection from his central defenders to go and press the ball, but this is a very long distance for him to be pressing, so more often than not, the player with the ball won't be forced into an error, but rather the goal of the press will be to force the ball into a situation where they have better access and can better win the ball. So by traveling such a long distance, it does offer a big opportunity for the team in possession, PSG, to break them, which Neymar, we can see here, drifting into the wide area, noticing the wingback is leaving his position. So by Neymar then going into a wide area, puts another central defender in an uncomfortable position to either be dragged out wide, isolated 1v1, or leave Neymar free in the wide area. PSG relied on numerical and qualitative superiority to move the ball up the field and create dangerous chances. And against the Leipzig side, using high levels of compactness and spatial control principles, it forced them to be very good to then use their two forwards to overcome this numerical disadvantage they were at when PSG were able to play into their midfield third. So we have our midfield diamond, which we said PSG often utilized when playing into the midfield with Neymar, Di Maria, and their two holding midfielders joining this diamond, creating a 4 versus 3 in midfield. But the staggering from the two forwards was often used to block access to the deeper holding midfielders to then counteract this numerical advantage. But as we see, when there's direct access into the holding midfielder, the staggering doesn't quite cover the holding midfielder. This numerical advantage can be taken advantage of, and the whole press could fall apart. Leipzig, they played very vertically, which suited their style of play. They play very vertically like Atletico Madrid might, and they do this with a three-man back line and a three-man midfield with the wing-backs creating the width in the midfield area, but they also use minimum width. So what this means is the two wing-backs don't occupy all the way to the touchline, as we might see from a team like Manchester City or a more expansive team. They occupy the inner part of the wide area to then give them a more compact offensive structure, allowing them to transition quicker and control the volatile transitions a little bit more to then hopefully exploit the unorganization of PSG's transition when PSG immediately win the ball. But this three-man midfield can often be joined by one of the two forwards. When the two forwards aren't pinning to create space for the interior midfielders, the two forwards can join the midfield, try and pull out a center back to then play in behind. PSG countered this with a 4-2-3-1, which saw minimal defensive roles for Mbappe and Neymar, Mbappe playing as the sole number 9, and the two holding midfielders behind the front four had a big job to protect their back four and create access to both interior midfielders of RB Leipzig, as well as control a direct pass into the forwards of RB Leipzig. And that's where we're going to cap off the analysis. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next one.